go to some towers, I'm sure this is not true in St Martin's Guild, but certainly I've been to some towers where Stedman seems to be regarded as a bit of a kind of mystery, and in some cases where it's not rung at all. People have some kind of explanations for that, one of which is that it's a sort of it's seen as a dead end. It doesn't lead on to anything else in the learning journey. But I'm not really convinced by that, because for one thing, I think in some ways it does, and also I don't think everything has to. Something like this is really valuable on its own. So if I can, I'm going to have a go at demystifying some of the mysteries. Here's an overview of the session. I'm just going to start, as many of the speakers in these talks have done very helpfully, by just breaking the method down into its building blocks and seeing how that fits together to provide an overview of the method. There's some particular names and terminology that go with Stedman, and there might be regional variations on these, but I'm just going to outline what people mean by some particular terms. Then we're going to have a look at some clues and tips, so just ways that you can find signposts that help you to know where you are and what you're doing. Also some pitfalls and common confusions if we've got time as well, so where you might go wrong. And then if there's time at the end, we'll start to look at the calls in Stedman. But if we don't get to that, then I'm sure that can be picked up next week. So this presentation might be aimed particularly for people from these 5 towers. I don't know if there's anybody on the session from any of these towers, but you might recognise what they have in common. Perhaps you don't, but these are all of the 3-bell towers in the Diocese of Birmingham. I was quite interested to notice that they all happen to cluster around that sort of area, just sort of southwest of Tamworth, with the exception of Newton Regis, which is the other side of Tamworth. But when I was a teenager and I used to get out and go cycling, and I was terribly keen ringer, I occasionally used to grab a couple of friends and we'd go to the 3-bell towers in the area where we lived and go and ring quarter peals. The problem is quarter peals on 3 bells are not really that interesting. You haven't got very much you can do, and you have to ring 210 extents of all the changes on 3 because you've only got 6 changes to play with. Really, all that we can do with 3 bells is plain hunt. Remember that there are certain kind of basic rules in constructing a method or a piece of ringing. It's conventional that nobody moves more than one place at once, and in most cases, although we've seen some exceptions last week with doubles methods and so on, but we try not to have bells spending more than 2 blows in the same place. So all we can really do on 3 bells is plain hunt. So this gives us 6 possible rows, and you can see that I've written them out here. This is plain hunting in the conventional way, with the bells leading handstroke and backstroke, hunting up to the back, lying, coming back to the front, and that gives us all of the 6 possible rows that we can go through on 3 bells. And here we are. We swap the first pair, and then the second pair, then the first pair again, second pair again, first pair, and then the second pair to get us back to rounds. And those are the 6 possible rows on 3 bells. There is, though, another way that we can produce those 6 rows, and you'll see that now in the right-hand column, which is to swap the pairs the opposite way round. So rather than swapping the first pair, first of all, we swap the second pair first. And that's as illustrated on the right-hand side. That gives us the same 6 rows, but in the reverse order. If you look from here, we get 2, 1, 3 as the first row there, and as the next to last row there, and so on.
Can I just interrupt, David? Sorry, I'm not sure your screen is being shared.
Oh, is it
certainly not for me. I'm just seeing you.
Ah,
right. I can see it.
I can see it. I can see it fine.
I can see it.
Might just be me then.
Good. Okay, I can turn the sharing off and back on again if that would help. I noticed, though, I have lost the thing at the top that says you are sharing your screen.
And it's working well.
Yeah, no, it says I am. Yeah, it's just because I've gone to full screen. So sorry about that. I can email you the presentation if that
No, it's
doesn't
okay.
sort out. You might, I don't know if you want to.
It may be that your participant view is over the top of the screen.
Yeah, just leave it to me. It's fine.
Okay, sorry about that. Thanks, Tony. So here we go. All the possible rows on 6 bells, both forwards and backwards. Now, actually, let's just go back to that previous one. One of the things that I'd like to draw your attention to here is that when we go backwards like this, the bells are leading backstroke and handstroke instead of handstroke and backstroke. So treble starts by staying at lead at the first handstroke, and then the third comes down and leads backstroke and hand instead of the other way around. So just note that because it will be of interest later. In ringing, as I said, we like names for these things, and we choose, because these are opposite ways of doing things, we choose 2 opposites. We could have chosen up and down or backwards and forwards or something, but by convention, hunting like this, where you're leading hand and back, is known as quick, and where you're leading back and hand is known as slow. And those of you who already know something about Stedman will recognise that those are words we use in Stedman. We talk about quick 6s and slow 6s. So these six rows on 3 bells are kind of the building blocks of Stedman. So we can start to add a little bit of interest to our 3-bell ringing. And here's a way to do that, which is potentially to alternate the quick and slow hunting, to alternate the hunting forwards and backwards. So this slide shows what happens if you do that. We're going to end up repeating rows because we've used all of our 6 possible rows by the end of the first section when the treble gets back to lead. But what we've done here is got to that point and then changed over to leading backstroke and handstroke instead of handstroke and backstroke. And that enables us to go through hunting alternately, quick and slow, forwards and backwards, whichever way you prefer to think of it. And if we go through that 6 times, we'll get back to rounds at backstroke after 6 lots of alternating hunting forwards and backwards, right and wrong, quick and slow. Let's draw a line through that little method that I've come up with there. And you might begin to recognise that this blue line looks a lot like the front work of Stedman slow work. Now, actually, in this case, it starts in a slightly different place. For reasons of convention and familiarity, it's customary to start Stedman with a Granser start, which means that rounds, so it starts with the treble hunting out, in this case, hunting out quick. So that actually means that rounds is the 4th row of a quick 6 by custom in Stedman. So actually, when we ring Stedman, we start the blue line there with the treble hunting out. The second, leading right, so handstroke and backstroke, and doing 1 blow in seconds, and then leading backstroke and handstroke, and then hunting out. To be able to see what happens on more bells, we really need to go to those more bells, so we'll come to that later. So technically, the customary Stedman start is the 4th row of a quick 6. Now, we need another building block to deal with what people are doing further up. And Stedman's other building block is the double dodge. Many of you will have come across double dodging. It was a feature of some of the doubles methods that Steve was talking about last week. If you've run Granser with bobs and singles in it, then you'll have done double dodges in 4/5 there. And you might notice that a double dodge also takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blows before the bells move on to another position. So it keeps a pair of bells dodging together for 6 blows, the same as that chunk of hunting on 3 on the front, which also takes 6 blows. Stedman is, we had this question about Stedman differential major, something, but Stedman is pretty much customarily always rung on odd numbers. So the double dodges are going to happen in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, if you like. And that means that if we're coming down here, so hand stroke, a backstroke, the dodge back is at hand stroke each time. And that's going to be something that's worth noting a bit later on. So, Stedman is made up of these blocks of 6 or chunks of 6 rows. The front work is like this. That's that line we saw earlier with the work on 3 bells, but this time with what's going on in 4, 5 and 6, 7 also shown. And that is the blue line for the Stedman slow work. Now once you have learnt this, you can put it together with the other building blocks, which is plain hunting, which you'll be familiar with already, and double dodging. And that is all you need to know to ring Stedman on any number of bells. The front work never changes, and what's happening, however many bells you put above that, is double dodging with then 1 bit of plain hunt for the quick work on the front. So you might notice some things about the Stedman front work that you haven't come across in methods that you've run before. In particular, as I pointed out before, it does involve leading, backstroke and hand stroke, as well as hand stroke and backstroke. It also involves leading for just 1 blow sometimes. So you just come in to lead, you do 1 blow at lead, and then you go straight away again rather than staying there for 2 blows. So some of that is unfamiliar. Another thing is that it involves making a place, and rather than turning round, you make the place and you carry on in the direction you were going. So it's almost like a little hold up in your going down the hill, but then you carry on the way you were going. So those features may or may not be familiar to you already. It's something that's a bit different and can just feel unusual when you first start to ring Stedman. So we'll have a bit more about that in a minute. Let's now look at some of the terminology here. So we talked about the quick and the slow 6s. The quick 6 is when the hunting is happening in the right way, with the bells leading hand stroke and backstroke. As I said, we start with a bit of a quick 6, and the treble does what we call going out quick. Here's our double dodges. In this case, a double dodge 4, 5 up, double dodge 4, 5 down. And however many bells we're ringing Stedman on, the double dodges, well, as long as it's an odd number of bells, the double dodges always take an even number of 6s because they come in pairs, 1 place up, 1 place down. In this case, that pair makes just 2 because there's only 1 dodging position. But if we're ringing triples, you dodge 4, 5 up, 6, 7 up, 6, 7 down, 4, 5 down. So those 2 pairs make 4 dodges. It's always an even number. Then this is coming in slow. When you do that little hiccup, pause in for 2 blows in 3rd place and then carry on. This is called the first whole turn, the first half turn, then the last half turn, the last whole turn, coming out slow. We then have another set of double dodges, up and down, and then we come in quick. And as with every other method, that line is the same for all the bells, just a matter of where you start. And I don't know, this is a bit of a small diagram, but you can see there's numbers on the left-hand side there, and they indicate the starting positions for each bell. So you've got 2 bells that start part-way through the slow work, the work on the front. So you need to learn what those starting positions are, but they are, just for the first bit, the same starts as in Grandsa. So that's some terminology. Let's just go on to look at how some of the bits and pieces fit together. I've annotated this slide as well with the letters B and H for backstroke and hand stroke to show which blow, which stroke each of the leads are at. And just another thing to draw your attention to, because it might be useful to know, as a useful signpost, is just to note that your first whole turn and first half turn coincide with somebody else's, in this case the 7th's, last half turn and last whole turn. Sorry, if I could have drawn a blue line around that, but I've just drawn boxes. I hope that's reasonably clear. By the corollary of that is that your last half turn and last whole turn must coincide with another bell's first whole turn and first half turn, and that's shown in red. So you're coinciding on the front with another bell that's also doing the slow work but at a different stage. It can just be useful to remember that your first whole and half turns coincide with somebody else's last half and whole turns, and vice versa. You may also notice that in between those whole turns, the quick bell comes in and leads handstroke and backstroke. So here we've got the second coming in quick and then going out in between the other bell's whole turns. And here it's the third doing the same. So because the sixes always alternate, quick and slow, a bell's only going to come in quick in every alternate block of 6 rows. So there's a quick bell there. There isn't one here because this is a slow 6. This is a quick 6, so it has a quick bell in it. I hope that makes sense. We'll go over some of this terminology again as time goes on, and I can come back to any of these if I go through a bit quickly. We'll also just see some of this again, so I hope that'll be an opportunity to build a bit more familiarity. Here, though, we're into some tips and some bits of interest. So we actually had a question. So Alan Cottrell, I hope this helps to answer your question, and it might be a question that other people had as well. How do you know? You may be coming in quick. You've been doing your double dodges up above, or you may be coming in slow. How do you know which way to do it? Well, let's go back to that previous slide as we've seen. And as I illustrated before, if the 6 is a quick 6, the bells will be leading handstroke and backstroke, handstroke and backstroke, handstroke and backstroke. If it's a slow 6, they'll be leading backstroke and handstroke, backstroke and handstroke, and then at the beginning and end, you have the bells that are just doing the one single blow at lead rather than 2. So one really reliable way to tell whether it's a quick 6 or a slow 6 is to watch and listen to the bells that are leading. If you see and hear that they're leading handstroke and backstroke, then that 6 at that time must be quick. And because you know that they alternate, you can then work out what sort of a 6 it's going to be when you need to know when you get to the front. If they're leading backstroke and handstroke, then it's a slow 6. And again, you can extrapolate from there what sort of a 6 it's going to be when you get to the front, and whichever sort of 6 it's going to be, that's the way you need to go in. So let's say you're dodging in 4-5 down, and you're watching what the bells are doing on the front. If you see that they're leading handstroke and backstroke, that tells you that that one is a quick 6. If you're in 4-5 down, you're going to be going onto the front in the next 6, and because they alternate, the next one's going to be a slow 6. On larger numbers of bells, you can notice the way that your course bell goes in. So the bell that you were dodging up with on the back is going to go down one place in front of you, and because they're a 6 ahead of you, they will go in one way and you've got to go in the opposite way. I've just made a little note. This can be complicated if one or both of you gets affected by calls. Some calls won't affect who you're following down to the front, but some will, or some might just give you an opportunity to forget. But that's a way to do it. You also, as we've established, you know that the 6s alternate and that you will, in the normal course of things, go in alternately quick and slow. And the average Stedman ringer has an average of just under 2 feet. So some people use their feet, their left and right feet, and they move them forwards or backwards to remind them whether they're going in slow or quick. You just have to remember which is your slow foot, and make sure that if there's lots of calls and bobs and singles that you don't fall over. But that can be a physical reminder, a way to remember. What conductors do, and you can do too, is to count the sixes through the course. It can be, obviously, there's a risk of losing count, but if you do count the sixes, then the one that you start with is quick, and that's 6 number 1. So the odd numbered sixes are all quick ones, the even numbered sixes are all slow ones. In quarter peals and in peals, so when we're doing a slightly longer piece of ringing, there may be observation bells as well that remain fixed. They're not affected by the calls for several courses. So those can be a reference point as well to look to. So I think the ideal thing to do is to watch and listen to the bells on the front and see which way they're leading. But that's not always easy to do. It obviously requires you to have the rope sight and the listening skills to be able to do that. There is, though, another top tip. Actually, this used to be published in the Ringing World Diary, but I think I haven't brought my diary down with me. I think it's disappeared from that now. But here is that tip, sometimes known as the 4-5 rule. So when we're double dodging 4-5 down, the blows that are in fourth place are always going to be at backstroke. The bells that are below us, so in this case, assume we're ringing the 5th, and we strike the first backstroke over the 4th, and then the second one is struck over the 3rd. We meet the 3rd here, and that tells us that we're going in quick, and the next bell we're going to strike over the 2 bells that we met in 4th place as we go on to the front. So in this case, if you meet the 2nd bell you struck over in 4th place, as you get to 3rds, then you're going to go in quick. Here, we strike over the 4th, and then the treble, so it's hard to see because it's on a join. This time we meet the 4th when we get to 3rd place, which is the 1st bell that we struck over, and that tells us that we need to go in slow. So that's a reliable top tip. Watch the bells you strike in 4th place as you're double dodging 4-5 down, and if you meet the 1st one when you get to 3rd place, you're going in slow. If you meet the 2nd one, you're going in quick. And that's because, obviously, the bells we strike over in 4th place, they are themselves ringing in 3rd place, so they reflect what type of 6 is being rung, and that means that when we meet them again, it helps us to tell which way we're going to go in. I'm sure the explanation that's in the old Ringing World Diary is probably much clearer than mine, but have a look at that, and that's a reliable tip, just using the rope sight that you would be using anyway, to see who you're striking over as you dodge, to give you a guide to how you're going to go onto the front. So that's sometimes known as the 4-5 rule. I've illustrated it here for doubles, but as I've said, because Stedman, the front work never changes, this works on any number of bells. I'm going to move on now to potential ways to go wrong. These are not going to be suggestions, but really just to alert you to them and ways to avoid them. I notice it's 7:30. Arthur, is there any urgent questions popped up, or anybody need a recap of anything?
Nothing's come up in the chat box in terms of questions and so on. I don't know if anyone pause for a couple of seconds, see if anyone wants to.
I'm aware that I sometimes get carried away with myself, so I hope I haven't gone too quickly.
No, it's good. It's good. I can't see anyone raising their hands, or as I say, people should be able to unmute themselves. So now's a good chance. People, I'll take silence.
Right. Your silence is taken as consent. Okay. In which case, if people are happy, I mean, do interrupt anytime you want to. But I thought it might be helpful. I don't want to sow seeds here, but just to think about the things that can go wrong, the ways that are opportunities to go wrong. So obviously it's possible to miss a dodge, accidentally do 1 instead of 2 when you're supposed to be double dodging, or accidentally slide into the wrong position. That can happen if things are getting a bit uncertain, or accidentally to do an extra dodge. If you're ringing a touch, it's possible to make a mistake by ringing a bob or a single in the wrong position. If you're not sure which way you're supposed to go in, and you have to pick one and you choose the wrong way to go in, obviously that is another way to make a mistake in Stedman. But I would have said probably most mistakes happen during the slow work, so on the front. And I've just tried to think of suggested some things that can be deceptive here. So one opportunity, one thing that you can go is, you know you're going in slow, but you forget to do that 2 blows, the extra blow in thirds on the way in, and that would put you on the front at the wrong stroke. Another temptation sometimes can be, you've come in slow, you're relieved, you've got all that done, you hunt up to thirds, you come back for your first half turn, and actually what you try and do is jump straight to the last whole turn. One of the reasons that can be a temptation is you might notice your last whole turn involves coming to lead and leading hand and back, which you haven't done since you first came in, except here at the first half turn. So some people use getting back to a hand stroke lead as the cue to do the last whole turn. But if you're going to do that, make sure that you don't jump in too soon and accidentally go straight from the first whole turn to the last whole turn just because you've got to that single lead, single blow at lead at hand stroke. Another thing that can happen, just moving a bit further on, is forgetting to lead for a second time when you're doing one of the whole turns, either there or there. It's possibly more common at the end than the beginning because, again, you're relieved, you've got the hard bit over and done with and you want to go out, but remember to do both of the leads, both the right lead, back hand and back, and the wrong lead, back and hand, in both of the whole turns. And another thing, if you're a real glutton for slow work, is potentially doing the thirds on the way out, but then actually then turning around and trying to go back in, because you've been doing these thirds and back, thirds and back, thirds and back, you might get into that pattern and try and go back in. So I mention those really just as a way to alert you to some of the potential pitfalls and opportunities there are for possibly getting tripped up, which is, as I say, I'm not suggesting that you should try these things, just bear in mind that those are possible errors. I'm just about to go on to a recap, but I happen to notice that one of the things I haven't mentioned, but really should have done, is that, as we saw from the diagrams earlier, in Stedman, all of the working bells do the work, including the treble. People who are coming from ringing plain bob and grand doubles and some of those other interesting variations that we saw may well be used to a method that's dominated by the treble as the hunt bell, or in the case of grand by the treble and another as the hunt bells. But Stedman is what's referred to as a principle, which is a special case of a method where all of the bells, including the treble, do the same thing. It doesn't have one fixed bell around which the rest of the work is structured. Everybody's doing the same thing. So here's a bit of a recap. Stedman front work is built up from alternating right hunting and wrong hunting on 3 bells. We call that right hunting and wrong hunting on 3 bells, we call those quick and slow sixes. And in a quick 6, the bells will be leading hand stroke and backstroke. In a slow 6, the bells will be leading backstroke and hand stroke, but with an odd single blow at lead at the beginning and end, which enables the changeover to happen. Above thirds place, everybody is doing double dodges. And a double dodge also takes 6 blows, so that takes up the same amount of space as the blocks on the front. If you arrive in thirds place and it's a quick 6, you're going to plain hunt down, you're going to lead right, that is hand stroke and backstroke, then plain hunt back up to 4-5 and start double dodging again. If you arrive in thirds place and it's a slow 6, then that's when you begin the slow work. We saw that a few slides back. That's the chunk of work that it's just really helpful to learn and which has specific terms that identify the individual pieces of work. We also went through several different ways to observe what kind of 6 it is so that you can then work out which way you're going to go in. Now, since all of those things are true, and quick and slow sixes are alternating, the back work, as I said, always takes an even number of sixes, one double dodge up and one double dodge down in each of the positions, however many there are. Then the bells must alternately go in quick and slow. So if you went in quick last time, you'll go in slow next time, unless there is a call. Now, I wanted to conclude really with talking through the calls and then opening it up to questions. I'm presenting this perhaps in a slightly counterintuitive way, but I've decided to show you, to illustrate the calls in kind of the opposite order from the way in which people would normally come across them. The reason for doing this is, as Steve reminded us last week, and I said I'd steal this line, doubles is a law unto itself. And the calls in Stedman doubles work differently from the calls in Stedman on any other number. So I'm going to come to those last of all. I also wanted to look at the single in triples case of sinks and so on, in this case triples. I wanted to look at the single first because arguably single is a simpler call to deal with. Obviously, the proof of the pudding is in the ringing, and I'll leave that up to you to work out. But again, I've come across people who are alarmed by singles in Stedman, so I just wanted to bring those in first of all. And then we'll move on to the bobs in triples, and then on to the singles in Stedman doubles. So as a single, if you're dodging, in this case in triples, 4-5 up, what you do is you turn around in fifths. So you make a place in fifths, and then you go into double dodging 4-5 down. You'll notice that what that's done is to cut out 2 sixes, 2 lots of double dodging, 6-7 up and 6-7 down. It's cut out those 2 lots of double dodging, those 2 sixes, from the work that you were doing. So that means, because the nature of the sixes alternates between quick and slow, you're still going to go in the same way you were going to. We've taken out an even number of sixes, so that means you'll still arrive on the front in the same kind of six, not the same one, but it'll be the same kind of six, because we've taken out an even number and they alternate. If you were double dodging 6-7 up, then you're unaffected. You just make sevenths and start double dodging 6-7 down again. The difference that you might notice is that the bell that's double dodging 6-7 down makes sixths, turns round and starts double dodging up again. What's in fact happened is that this bell has swapped with this one and has taken on the work that it was going to do. So green now double dodges up again, lies and double dodges down. So we've added 2 extra double dodges. We've added 2 sixes to its work. Again, we've delayed it, we've changed it by an even number of sixes. And if we add or subtract an even number of sixes, there's no change to the way you go in because the sixes alternate. So if we take 2 away or add 2, you still get to the front in the same kind of six. I can go over that again, but we'll see. Here's a bob in triples and above. At the bob, again, this bell does the same, makes fifths, turns back round, goes in. Again, it's advanced by 2 sixes, so it's going to go in the same way as it meant to, albeit 2 sixes earlier. The bell that was dodging 6-7 up does an extra dodge in 6-7 up, and then continues double dodging, which means it does, it's 1-2 dodges there, an extra one for the bob, and then 1-2 and lies. So in fact, it does 3 extra dodges in total. If there's only one bob, you can get more than one bob in a row, but let's keep this simple. So you do an extra dodge for the bob, and then you're double dodging 6-7 up, lie, dodge down. That's added 1 6 to your line, which means it changes the way that you're going to go in. And here, this bell that was double dodging 6-7 down does a similar thing. It adds an extra dodge for the bob and carries on dodging down. So in total, it adds 3 dodges, 1 for the bob, and the double dodge that anybody would have done there anyway, and then goes down to 4-5. Again, that's delayed that bell by 1/6, so it means it changes the way it goes in. So if we add an odd number of 6s, then we have to swap the way you're going to go onto the front. We can have a recap on all of this. Just wanted to illustrate here, if you used to ring Stedman triples and you go to caters or sinks, then the bob is always done, it always involves the bells in the back 3 places. So here's an illustration of Stedman sinks with a bob or a single. I'm sorry that the colours have swapped from my previous slide. I nicked these graphics. That's partly my responsibility, but it wasn't me that chose the colours. But what you'll see here is with 11 working bells, rather than the bob being made in 5th place when we had 7, it's made in 9th place because the calls stay in the back 3 places. So let's finish now by looking at doubles. The calls that we've just looked at wouldn't work in doubles because we've only got 5 bells to play with. So if we change them and had a different place made at the 6th end, it would change the front work. And as I've said to you at the beginning, the front work in Stedman never changes. So all we've got to play with in Stedman doubles is the pair of bells that are double dodging together. Now, that's all we need, because as Simon reminded us a few weeks ago, this playing course of Stedman doubles is already 60 changes long. So to get all 120 possible rows, which is the extent, we only need to double that length. So all we need is 1 pair of singles. Can have more, but all we need is 1 pair of singles to swap a pair of bells over and back again. And that gives us 120 of Stedman. So what happens here? Well, if you just come off the front, either quick or slow, doesn't matter. If you just come off the front, instead of doing your double dodge, you do 1 blow in 5ths, 2 blows in 4ths, 1 more in 5ths, and go on to the front. My next slide actually illustrates that a bit better, so here we go. So you come up, you do a point blow in 5ths, 2 blows in 4ths, point 5ths, and then you go back in. Now, that means you've been in on the back in the dodging position in 4/5 just for 1/6 rather than 2. So you've cut 1/6 out. That means you're going to go back in the way you came out. It swaps the way you're going to go in. So if you came out quick and you do this, you'll go back in quick. This piece of work is often called cat's ears. I've turned it sideways there so you can see why. Not that I really needed to do that, I don't suppose. I haven't got a cat to sit on my lap to do this. Now, the bell that had been double dodging 4/5 up and was lying fits around that piece of work. So it does 1 blow in 4ths, lies behind, 1 blow in 4ths, lies behind again, and then double dodges down. Now, I've said this is called coat hangers. I think there was a conversation a few weeks ago about what the conventional term for this piece of work is, but find out what it's going to be called if you need to refer to it and where you're ringing. Now, this bell is held on the back for 1 extra 6. So that also swaps the way it's going to go in. So again, if you do this piece of work, you go back in the same way as you came out. We had some conversation again with Steve last week about where it is that you make a call in doubles methods. In this case, we usually make the call at the end of the previous 6 or at the beginning of the next 6. So we make the call obviously in time to give you a whole pool's notice of what is different and what you're going to need to do differently. Same is true in triples, cases and sinks and so on. The call is conventionally made at the 5th row of the 6, which gives you a whole pool notice where to do it. So the calls are made and take effect in different places in doubles. In doubles, they happen in the middle of the 6, at the 3rd and 4th row of the 6, rather than across the changeover between 6s. So yeah, so that means they're called at row 1 of the 6. So those are your singles in doubles, and that concludes my presentation. And we got all of that from Plain Hunting on 3. And this is my copy that I've taken a photograph of there. This is Fabian Stedman's little book, and there's his chapter on Stedman's principle. And then on the right-hand side there, I've just put a little simple, straightforward composition of what a peel of Stedman thinks might look like. Just for illustration purposes. I hope that was helpful. I'm aware that there was an awful lot in there, and you will need to recap some stuff. So by all means, ask about that now. Arthur has said there's going to be an opportunity for a future session. So I will be quiet now. I'll take a sip of beer, and please fire away.
Thank you ever so much, David. I think it's fair to say that Stedman's a little bit like Marmite, isn't it, for ringers? You know, you've got lots of ringers, particularly those of us in Birmingham who love Stedman. But in other places across the country, some people are less keen on Stedman. But I think, as your talk demonstrated tonight, there's so much to it. I think it's a wonderful principle, wonderful thing to ring, and hopefully sort of people tonight sort of got some of that. I think there's something coming through in the. Oh, there's some thank yous coming through in the chat box for you. I mean, as you rightly mentioned, you covered an awful lot there, and I think next week we have an opportunity if people, what I'd advise people to do is to go and have a look again at these materials. We'll put them on the website if people don't have questions now. I think it's definitely worth having a look again at the video and the materials that we'll put on there, because there is an opportunity to for us to go through things a little bit slower next week, sort of aspects of it if people need that. What was I going to say? Claire's just put in the chat box in double. Oh, sorry. In doubles, I note the single is called at the end of a quick 6. Can you call a single at the end of a slow 6?
Yes, yeah, you can. So you can have singles in either type of 6 in doubles. If people do go back and look at the presentation again, as I confessed, I stole the illustrations. There is actually a mistake in the numbers, in the actual figures for my illustration of a single. The person who's put it together has made a mistake in the front work, but it does illustrate what happens on the back, which is what's important. But yes, you can call a single either at the end of any 6 in Stedman doubles.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. And Tony's put a lot of the like or dislike of Stedman is down to the availability of conductors. It's not trivial to call, and ringers' ability to stay right. And I have to admit, David, when you're talking about the slow work and the mistakes that can happen, if people go wrong in the slow work, that can be catastrophic in Stedman quite quickly, can't it?
And if anybody's ever rung a Dutch appeal of Stedman that I've been calling, they might know one of the things that I do pretty much straight away as soon as something goes a bit wrong is announce what type of 6 it is. Because that helps at least to stop the spread of the problem, because people are given that confirmation. But yeah, I mean, what Tony says is absolutely right. What you say is right. There can be some squeamishness about it. But I think, as I've tried to illustrate, there's also a huge amount of variety that's possible with a method that's actually a fairly simple concept. And I think that's part of the beauty of Stedman.
I'd absolutely agree with that. Stella's put, you'll need to rewatch the video to be clear about the quick and slow fixes. And Stella, I absolutely, agree that there's a lot there, but, please encourage people to go and look at them again, the materials, and if there is anything, just send the SMG CBR email, a quick email in the next couple of days, and that'll help us to think about next week. I was thinking for that presentation, I might put together a Google quiz to send out to people to challenge and see people's understanding so that we can
plan
it through.
So I see in the chat box that Julie's asking for a bit of clarification about the calls. So yeah, sorry about that, Julie. Perhaps I went a bit hastily there. I had half an eye on the clock. If you're delayed by an even number of 6s, that doesn't change, or if you're advanced by an even number of 6s, it doesn't change the way you're going to go in, because the 6s alternate. So if you add or subtract an even number, you're going to get the same results as you had to start with. So in doubles, the single changes the way you go. I'm going to start again. In doubles, the single changes the way you were going to go in, which means that you go in the same way you came out. am I just causing more confusion now?
No, I think, Julie, you're welcome to unmute yourself if you want to engage in that conversation. Does that make sense?
So the reason I put it that way about the doubles is because doubles happens more quickly. So you've come off the front more recently. So for me, it sort of makes more sense to think about going back in the same way you came out. Whereas on higher numbers, what I tend to have in mind is what my plan is, more than what I've just done. Perhaps that's me. If that doesn't help, Julie, think about it a different way. There's lots of different ways to think about it.
Thank you. Well, that, if people, again, I can't see any hands up or other stuff in the chat box. What I'll do, I'll end the recording, so sort of in the formal bit, and again, end the formal bit by a huge thank you to David. You know, again, the resources are excellent. I think, you know, I think it's one of those things that people will find very, very useful to go back over, particularly when we're about to go back in the tower and you're about to pick up and you know, ring Stedman again, and then open up the, you know, unmute people, and you know, people can stay around for a chat and you know, and ask questions. And again, you know, we'll be around to answer those. So thank you ever so much, David, for that.
It's a pleasure. No, I enjoyed it. Yes. I used to do some lecturing where some of my students were in the room and some of them were at a remote location. So I had a headset on and a screen and things, and this reminds me a lot of that. One of the things my supervisor pointed out then was it was also a really helpful way to moderate my pace, make sure I didn't get away from start going too quickly. Yeah, I hope we've not gone too quickly.
There's lots of